Oh, I'm sorry. I think $3. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so it's not.
Hello. Hi, and welcome everybody to the October monthly program for Potomac Valley Audubon Society. I know there's a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but I'm Sonia. In case you don't know me, I'm the Associate Director of Education. And I'm very excited to welcome Laurel Schwartz, our guest speaker for tonight, even though she's not really a guest because she's one of us. But she had this incredible experience this summer at this incredible place. So we're going to have a treat learning about that spot. And we also have a second bonus speaker tonight, Annie Young. You want to raise your hand there? Yeah, Annie Young. Annie is a longtime friend and visitor to Hog Island. So Annie's going to be helping joining Laurel in with the talk here and there. So I'll give a more formal introduction in a minute, but first I want to tell you a bit about the happenings here at PVAS these days. Okay. So here's some photos from last week. So this is at our Turtle Time program at the Case Nature Center. And I just wanted to show you these pictures to show you that youth programs are alive and well with Potomac Valley Audubon Society. So while we've had to make a lot of cuts and trimming, pruning to our youth education programs this year, we're still keeping some of these core things going. And because we have our animal ambassadors there at the Nature Center, and people love to come and learn and meet and learn from our animal ambassadors, we're keeping this going. And so there's one last week. We're going to have one next week on October 14th. So hope you can make it out for that. We're also looking for volunteers because while I say our youth education programs are thriving, this is a year that we need volunteers more than ever. So with that, I wanted to make known that next week, tomorrow. Tomorrow we're having a new sort of training for youth education volunteers. This is really good for anybody that's been a volunteer before, but also new volunteers. So the idea behind this is that whatever sort of youth education program that we have volunteers at, there's some things that we just want everybody to know, right? Some good techniques for working with youth, some of the rules about working with youth, and some of the super science research-backed reasons why environmental education is important. So in order to give everybody that solid footing, whether it's a refresher or totally new content, we put together this training, and it is going to be hybrid. So it'll be over Zoom and at Cool Spring Preserve. And because it's over Zoom, we're also going to be recording it. So this means that even if you can't make it tomorrow, the link will be available for you so that you can be at that training on your own schedule and join in whenever it is good for you and your life to get that training in. This will be followed by other sorts of trainings. So this is just kind of like the broad brushstrokes, things everybody should know. But then of course, for the very specific things like Laurel's Watershed training, we'll have further trainings for that. So like when there's specific curriculum and activities and those specific things we want volunteers trained on, we'll have specific trainings for that. Friday, or this week, is a pretty big volunteer week because we have that going on. We've also very recently added to the calendar this garden cleanup volunteer work day at Yankower. So that's 10 to 12. So hopefully you can come out for that on Friday and help make that front garden at Yankower even more beautiful than it already is and get it set up well for it flourishing in the spring. And then on that same day, Friday, we have more opportunities for either you to be a volunteer or to be a participant. So our Trail of Bones program is back. This is a fun Halloween hike, but really a natural science hike. So enjoying the fun vibe of Halloween while learning about skulls and antlers and all kinds of different things that we pull out of the barn for this special event and have other fun things going on. So it'll be a campfire, Yeah, and just nice stuff. So we have, if you go to our website, you'll be able to go to the link to register, but we also have the links for the particular volunteer roles we're still looking for. So if you want to come out, and if great, if you want to come out and help out, extra great. We would love to have you there. Another great way to support us is by coming to our fall event this weekend. So on Sunday, on October 12th, is our fall foliage fiddles and fair. And we know that in the past we said that there was a cutoff date for signing up, but bonus news is that there's 15 extra tickets that are still available. So if you are here in person and you are interested in attending this event, you'll go see Kristen and you'll tell her your name, even though she probably knows who you are already, and you'll tell her how many people you want to come with you. If you are attending over Zoom and you decided that you want to come on Sunday, please email Ellen tomorrow. So that's Ellen, Ellen, at PotomacAudubon.org, and email her by tomorrow because we do need to have our final numbers sorted and all of that kind of stuff. So email her with who you are and how many people you want to join with you at this event. Okay, finally, one other thing. Well, maybe a few other things. So we're still looking for some nice high quality physical items or also services that we can put into our online auction this fall. For those of you who don't know, this is a really cool way that PVAS raises some funds, as well as a really cool sustainable way to get gifts for people with this upcoming holiday season. So if you have things that you would like to donate, high quality, not like broken little doodads. Something nice, something you want to give for a gift, right? Or a service, right? Maybe you do something professionally, or you know somebody professionally that does something cool that could offer a service. We'll be taking those items and services until October 20th. That's right, October 20th. So yeah, think about that. Hopefully you will. Also, since I know some folks in the room were interested in some of our upcoming events, I'll mention a few of these coming up as well. So one really cool thing that we have coming up, and we have a lot of spots for, is that there is a CPR Stop the Bleed class that's completely free next week. There's a morning session, there's an afternoon session. This was made possible because the master naturalist set it up, since it's really great for master naturalists to be able to get this kind of certification, but really anybody in the PVAS community is welcome to attend this. And it's free certification, so that's really, really great. Of course, we have our Nature Center open days. I mentioned how next week it'll be joined with the turtle time. That's very exciting. Also next week, things are just happen one right after the other. That Watershed field trip volunteer training that I mentioned that Laurel will be leading, that's happening on Wednesday. And more beyond. So Wellness Walk is on Thursday, October 21st, and that one is going to be at Blandy, specifically to see the ginkgo grove in its like golden glory in the fall. So that should be a great time, and I know everyone always loves joining Ellen Murphy for those walks. Nature journaling also on the horizon. Also at the end of this month and into early November, there's 3 different sessions, but we're going to have these saw-whet owl banding field trips, which are really, really great. If you haven't experienced that, please consider signing up for it. And if you have, I know you'll probably want to go back because I do as well. That meets at the Boonesboro Park and Ride, so it's not really that far away. And that's October 21st, October 23rd, November 1st, and November 7th for those things. Finally, I want to announce the next monthly program, which is going to be, our guest is going to be PVAS member, supporter, and amateur photographer Jane Gamble, who has won numerous awards for her photography. And so we're going to be in the midst of November when things are a little crunchy and grayer. We're going to go on a nice photographic journey to inspire our gardens in the spring. And Jane will be sharing her beautiful photographs with us. and talking about the considerations she put into place for creating her bird-friendly garden. So hope you can join us for that one. And finally, it's time for our presentation. So Laurel is our speaker for this evening. And so Laurel Schwartz is a PVAS program specialist. Since September 2021, she has managed PVAS's fourth grade Watershed program, and she is the Audubon Discovery Camp Director. Laurel is a lifelong Jefferson County resident and Shepherd University graduate. She graduated from Shepherd University with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies and a concentration in Sustainable Resource Management. During the summers between school years, she worked as a seasonal park ranger for both the National Park Service at Harpers Ferry National Historic Park and the Army Corps of Engineers at Loyalhanna. I'm sure about that. Lake Recreation Area. After graduation, Laurel served an AmeriCorps year with PVAS as an environmental educator. Through this role, she fell in love with youth education and nature interpretation. After her AmeriCorps year, Laurel worked for Virginia Tech as a soil science research associate and Jefferson County substitute teacher. In her free time, Laurel can be found hiking, spending time with her dogs, relaxing in a hammock, or in the kitchen trying out new recipes. Let's welcome Laurel.
All right. I mean, okay. I had to comfort myself today. Okay, perfect.
All right, thank you so much, Sonia, and thank you everyone for coming in person or on Zoom today. This is my first time presenting a monthly program. I've been helping out with them doing the tech for years now, and I always enjoy listening to the speakers, so I'm excited to be a speaker today. And today I'm excited to present on my experience at Hog Island. And I also wanted to say thank you to both PVAS for sending me on this experience and realizing just what an unforgettable, incomparable experience it is to anything else. And also for the donors that made this possible for me and for another Berkeley County teacher as well. So this is Katie. She went to Hog Island with me. She's a Berkeley County teacher at Spring Mills Middle School, and she really wanted to be here tonight to present with me, but due to personal circumstances, she was not able to make it. But she did send along this note. She wants to thank us for our scholarship, and she mentioned that that this has really reinvigorated her love for teaching and doing things in the classroom, and she's been having meaningful conversations with peers about her experience, and she's brought back a wealth of resources and lessons to her classroom from this experience. So Katie says thank you, and I'm so glad that I got to spend a week with her because she's an awesome educator as well. All right, so this is our program outline, what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I am going to be presenting on some of Hog Island's history, kind of briefly. I'm going to go through it. There's a lot of history, and it's a really well documented history with some awesome photos that they have saved in their archive. So you're going to get to see that, but I'll talk about Native peoples and early history a little bit. And island preservation and the whole story with that, and then some camp history, Project Puffin, and then Annie is gonna talk about family camps as well because she's been attending family camp for the last 3 years. And then we'll also talk about my personal experience with Hog Island and the things that I enjoyed the most and some of my takeaways as well. And then at the end, I'll open things up for questions or comments or anything of that nature. And I wanted to ask before I get started, who in the room has been to Hog Island before? I know of a few of you. Awesome. Somebody that I didn't. Wonderful. Okay. So feel free at the end to share any of your personal experiences and what made Hog Island really special to you as well. All right, so we're gonna dig into that Hog Island history now. And I will say I'm by no means an expert on this Hog Island history. This is what I learned this year at my camp week. They do an amazing job there of teaching the history of the island because it is part of what makes it so magical and special. And it is the reason that this place is preserved today. So I'm not an expert. I'm happy to try to answer any questions, and there might be other people in the room that can do a good job as well. All right, so back 1200 years ago, there was a continental glacier that was over top of all of coastal Maine, basically, and it retreated about 12,000 years ago. So the geology there, as far as being exposed to the elements, the earth, is pretty new. So that's why we have this really rugged coastline. Think Acadia National Park, because we're at Hog Island, we're only about, an hour from there. So, the land is rather new in terms of, being exposed to the elements in succession. But native people have inhabited the land that we call Maine now since time immemorial. Today, people from 4 tribes, the Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot, collectively known as the Wabanaki people, or people of the Dawn Land, really beautiful name, live throughout the state of Maine, and specifically at Hog Island, the Abenaki people were there. And we have evidence of there being Native American people on the island because there is this awesome shell midden or kitchen midden, which is just layers of shell, bone, and artifacts that show us that there have been people here for generations upon generations that have lived on this land and made use of its natural resources. So in the late 1600s, early settlers, European settlers, start to arrive to Hog Island and the coastal Maine islands. And we start to see some agriculture used on Hog Island. So I've heard people ask a lot, well, why is it called Hog Island? Are there hogs there? Not anymore, but there used to be. So that was the main purpose of the island back in the late 1600s. There were hogs that were released, and then, settlers would come and harvest them. So they were just kind of, to my understanding, like wild hogs that are domesticated, but left to go wild on the island. And there are other islands named Sheep's Island, Cow Island, and Egg Rock, which we'll come back to later. But they asked the question at Hog Island, why do you think Egg Rock, which was the historical nesting site for puffins, was called Egg Rock? Anybody have a guess? Well, yeah, Janet?
Refrigerator where you get your eggs.
Exactly, yes. She said a refrigerator where you get your egg. So that is where the early settlers would go to collect eggs. Now, of course, these were seabird eggs. These are not chicken eggs. So, but that we'll kind of come back to, and we'll talk about puffins and seabirds. So in the early 19th century, there was a growth in economic activity, particularly the shipbuilding industry. So this is a time where there were a couple buildings constructed on the island. There was a Queen Mary building, which is a ship's chandlery. So they sold parts for ships, and at this time, the island was also at great risk for being logged. And fortunately, it was not logged during this time, but other islands around the area were for the shipbuilding industry. So in the early 20th century, this Point Breeze Inn and Bungalows is constructed on the island by a couple with the last name Ambrose, and they construct this place to be sort of a getaway for typically wealthier people, from the mainland, sometimes from even bigger cities farther away. During this time, it's getting really trendy for particularly wealthy people to go out and reconnect with nature, right? So at this time, there's a lot of buildings constructed on the island, and many of those buildings are still there today, and they're used for the Hog Island camp. The one we're looking at in the photo is what is now called the Queen Mary, and that's where the science lab and some of the dorms are. But in the past, this was actually partially cottages people would stay, but also it was considered the casino where people would go for dancing and music at night. So they had a lot of activities at this Point Breeze Inn. You could play croquet, you could go swimming. It sounded like the place to be for your nature getaway every summer. And Mabel Loomis Todd agreed. So she is going to be a very important person, her and her daughter, in our story of island conservation. But her family first came here when it was Point Breeze Inn and Bungalows, and they were interested in getting away for the summer. They kind of fit the bill as the wealthier family. Mabel's husband, David, he was a famous astronomer. So they would come there and summer there, and Mabel just really fell in love with this island and wanted to conserve it. So over time, they start to buy up different parcels on the island, and at a certain point, they become the largest, landowners on the island. And then at a certain point, also the Point Breeze Inn and Bungalows goes bankrupt. So this is like early 1900s. The Point Breeze Inn goes bankrupt, and she becomes the majority owner of the island. And she's thinking, wow, this is such a special place for my family. How can I conserve this island? It's also so ecologically sensitive and important for these seabirds as well. So she has a daughter, and Millicent Bingham, and her daughter shares this vision as well. So this is a quote from Millicent Bingham, and it says, Todd protected the island in every way she could, from fires left by careless picnickers, from persons cutting masks or Christmas trees, or digging for relics in the prehistoric kitchen midden. So even protecting those Native American artifacts, they really value preserving this island. So in 1910, she formally bans hunting on Hog Island. And again, quote from her daughter, I could never feel that I owned such a place. It seemed rather the property of all those who cherished it and who wished to preserve it for others who would cherish it likewise in years to come. So I began to wonder how I could make such a dream come true. And then in 1933, Millicent Todd Bingham, like I said, she is the majority owner of this land. She's been deeded the land from her mother. However, she is a woman during this time. So is anything really truly hers? That's difficult, but she also wants to conserve this land. And she wants to buy out the rest of the shares. And thankfully, the Ambroses that owned the Point Breeze Inn and Bungalows, that have since kind of gone bankrupt, they still own part of the island, but they're willing to work with her and wait until she can get the money from her mother's life insurance and help from a friend to be able to buy out the rest of the island. So she does buy the rest of the island, and then in 1933, she starts her search for a buyer that's going to help her conserve this island. So she's reaching out to naturalist societies all through Maine, that hoping to find somebody that can help her conserve this island. And thankfully, in 1935, she finds John Baker, who is the director of what will become National Audubon. So she leases Hog Island to John Baker for just $1 a year, so that he can start his vision of having a camp there to instruct adult educators that are going to carry forth this legacy of environmental education. And at this time, I'll invite Annie up to the stage because she has a letter from Millicent Bingham that really kind of underscores what her vision was.
I found this, and having it in Millicent's words, I found it so powerful when I was there. Hearing the words of a woman during the Depression, seeing her vision actualized. So here is in 1937, her observations of the camp happening. The whole camp exhaled an atmosphere of wonder, the beginning of wisdom. Here was my forest wilderness, a laboratory of eager students who were not only enjoying it, they were taking it in bit by bit, studying and classifying its resources, making it yield its secrets. And yet, with it all, the wilderness remained a wilderness. The solitude was as untouched as ever. It is curious about nature lovers, they are well named, for there is in every one, even in naturalists who make the study a scientific life work, an emotional quality, an instant response. Those who love nature usually begin young. In childhood, responses to natural objects are instinctive. If a child's attention is drawn to wild creatures, his acquaintance with them broadens as the years go on. He understands them. They are his friends for whom, as other friends, he feels affection. I recall those years during which I had been trying to convince somebody, anybody, that the island was a good place for a nature camp, and how I'd been told over and over again that there were not enough people interested in nature in the whole United States to support such a project. I'm glad you didn't listen. Each time that I heard it could not be done, I turned my thoughts towards those silent moss-carpeted forests. I listened to the thrushes and the gathering dust. I saw those magic midsummer nights and the slowly engulfing tide, the tide at the full, the moon at the full, when each stroke of the oars left a cloud of light deep down in the water, and the ripples in the wake of the rowboat etched the surface with luminescence plowed up from beneath, sparks on the surface, blending with the reflected universe of stars. Ah, I thought, if only the island could be saved, it would do more for us than we possibly could for it. For by activities such as those of the Audubon Nature Camp, an enlightened attitude of mind will be fostered in the children of today, who, as leaders of tomorrow, will have not only the power to act, but because of this attitude, the power also to act wisely.
Yeah, so beautiful writing by Millicent, and she really was a very educated and well-studied woman as well. She was an Emily Dickinson scholar, like one of the renowned ones at the time. Maybe others can elaborate on this later because I don't know all the details, but her mother also had an affair with Emily Dickinson's brother. So she was a close personal friend and editor of Emily Dickinson as well. So that was a cool Hog Island connection too. And Millicent was one of the first women to get a PhD from Harvard as well. She was the first in her major, and I believe, I looked it up, she double majored in geology and geography and got a PhD. So very well studied, educated woman that cared deeply about conservation, and Hog Island has her to thank and her mother to thank for the conservation of the island, preservation. So in 1935, the Todd Wildlife Sanctuary is established. And then in 1936, Audubon Camp opens, and Carl Busheister becomes the first camp director. And he later goes on to become the director of National Audubon as well. So, and he was there for quite a good long time. And then Educators Camp begins. So really the goal of this Educators Camp, well summarized in that letter that Annie just read, but is to educate the next generation of teachers. So people who are going to teach kids, going to teach other adults about nature. So really the camp kind of starts with this emphasis on teaching identification, right? Which was common at the time, like museum identification and field guide identification. So they're teaching, they have classes in plant life and marine life and bird studies. But then over time, they kind of broaden their approach to education because they attract more people that are just scholars of nature and not necessarily book learning teachers. And they kind of broaden to teaching about environments and habitats as well. And women have always been very important in Hog Island leadership. So even that first summer that they're open in 1936, they hire Dorothy Treat. She is one of the educators, the instructors that are there for the first summer. So it seems that they really put an emphasis on having women in some of these leadership roles before that really was commonplace at all. So I think that's a neat part of the story. And then there's also a legacy of, you know, in the early days of directors' wives really taking on administrative roles and helping the camp run smoothly as well. So in 1960, Millicent Bingham deeds Hog Island to the Audubon Society formally. So she's realizing that she's getting to an older age at this point and that she wants to make this arrangement permanent and not just the leasing type arrangement. So she deeds the whole island to Audubon Society. And some of you might notice that there is a special member in attendance there. Who in that picture is special to us? Anybody
I
have
think
any-
I can't tell, it's really hard to see.
I know, she's got a profile.
Right?
Yes, Rachel
Yeah.
Carson is in that photo. So she was a close personal friend of Millicent Bingham's. And Rachel Carson came out to the island's dedication. And so there's a few different photos. This is just one I chose. I should have chosen a better one of her. But there's a few different photos with her in attendance. And she has a picture there at the dedication rock that we got to hike out to as well. So that was in 1960. And then in 1969, a special instructor comes along to Hog Island, and this is Steve Kress. And he is really special because he started Project Puffin, which was the project to reintroduce puffins to the coastline of Maine. So they had been extirpated since the early 1900s. That was the last time there was a breeding population. Again, just because there really weren't conservation measures in place to protect them at the time, and people were just recklessly, you know, taking their eggs or destroying their habitat in different ways. So in 1969, Steve Kress starts teaching ornithology, and while he's at Hog Island, he's reading literature about the puffins that used to be there. And he comes across a passage that says that puffins were numerous on this Eastern Egg Rock breeding colony, and there were other breeding colonies as well. And that really gets him excited, and he thinks we should bring puffins back to Eastern Egg Rock so that we have them here in the coastline of Maine for people to observe again. However, so he starts this Project Puffin in 1973, and Audubon Society is behind him on this, and they get permission for him to get eggs, or not eggs, but little pufflings, which is what was cutest name for a baby puffin, from Newfoundland. And I believe he had 12 his first year that he brought over to Eastern Egg Rock. And unfortunately, that first year, the puffins did not return. So he put them on the rock, they go out to their migration, which is on the open ocean, they come back, hopefully, but this year they did not come back. So he had a lot of naysayers at the time. There were people that said, this was about the time of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So there were people that said, well, you know, they're protected now. So if they wanted to come back, they would come back, right? There were people that said, your project is, you know, you got a good direction here, but it just won't work, and it's just not working. And it actually wasn't until 1977. So from 1973 to 1977, there were no puffins that returned to Egg Rock. And in 77, that was the first one that actually returned from one of the pufflings that they put on Egg Rock. And the key to his success was really something very innovative in the bird conservation space. He used decoys to get puffins to return to the island, which might seem kind of commonplace now, like something that you would think to do. But back then, decoys had never been used for a conservation project. They had only been used for hunting, to attract certain birds to a place to hunt them. So he's the first to say, hey, maybe if we put these decoys, the birds will think, oh, this is a good place to nest because there are already puffins here. And that's exactly what they needed. They just needed to see another puffin to know that this was a long-standing breeding colony, or to think that it was, to return to. So in 1983, that is when the first puffin that was originally hatched on Eastern Egg Rock returns to Eastern Egg Rock. So that was another big milestone there. And today there are lots of puffins on Eastern Egg Rock. We got to go out at camp and see them. So I'll show you some photos from that later on. But there is a very established breeding colony since the 1980s now, and they continue to grow in number. And Steve Crest still works with Project Puffin, and Project Puffin still exists. And there are still, they're working on other seabird habitat restoration and more puffin colonies and growing those in numbers as well. So in 1998, this is when family camp begins. So they start to reach out from their audience of just having adult campers to having some teen campers and also this family camp happening. And Annie has attended family camp for the last 3 years. So I'm gonna have her talk to you just a little bit about that. So she'll come up again.
I invited myself because I can never talk enough about Hog Island, and we were scholarship recipients from PVAS. I tell the story. Kristen was telling us a little bit about information about it, and I was curious about the camp, and I heard family camp. And I said, is it the kind of camp that has a ropes course? And she said, no. And I said, we're going, like, let's just get this scholarship going, you know, and we were so grateful for that opportunity, and I can never pay it forward enough. And I keep trying, and then we go back and I'm just so much more inspired, and I try to bring programs back and volunteer, and I can never give as much as we've gotten. My daughter has gone, and it was just right after COVID, and just to be able to be in a space, there's just so much beautiful validation about nature lovers. And I think for young people to be able to experience a community of families and young kids who are nature lovers is so powerful. As an educator and a woman, I think that legacy of a woman who started this for teachers to teach about nature, so the long game of getting kids to love nature as our way of creating protection and policy, is in my very deepest heart. And so to be able to not only experience that as an educator, but as a mother, it's very inspiring to me. I won't go on and on because I could, but I was, if you can see, that's my daughter. She is, my husband has gone with us. He's never in the pictures, so he does exist. And he went as a volunteer this past year. We've been able to, my daughter was able to get an ambassador scholarship through Hog Island this past year. And so she would be here tonight, but she just got braces on and she's not feeling her best. So I was laying in the moss. They do this with us, and there's the moss as thick as just, I don't even know, it goes on, and you just lay in it and it absorbs the sound, and we all lay there for 10 minutes together, and it's just one of the most beautiful things. So I was laying there in the moss, and this poem came down and it landed on my chest. Poems don't do that to me ever, but this one did, and so I wanted to share it. It's called Soft Landing. Tell me your favorite thing. Is it laying your head down on a bed of primordial moss, or filling your cup in the morning and turn to be greeted by a new friend who asks how you slept and cares? Or finally catching the song of the perula your room is named after? Does your head feel stretched with new things, and maybe your tummy too? May your blisters or sunburn or bug bites last long enough to remind you that this place is real, and may your memories sweeten as they ripen. Until next time. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share that.
Beautiful, thank you, Annie. All right, so my last history slide here. So in 2009, the camp was really facing some financial hardship, and they did close for a year. It was the first time they hadn't had camp sessions since World War II. So the camp closed due to financial struggles, but luckily in 2010, this organization that had been around in the background, the Friends of Hog Island, you know, helping raise money for the camp, they really stepped up their game, and they said, we're going to contribute $50,000 a year to the operations of Hog Island. We're going to work on the buildings that you need fixed up, because remember, these are pretty old buildings. and we're going to contribute volunteers. So I just wanted to bring this up because if you are feeling a real itch to get to this island, and you don't necessarily want to be a camper or it's a little pricey, they have an option of volunteering as a Friends of Hog Island volunteer. So you can work in the kitchen for the week and then get your meals covered and your room covered. And it's a pretty awesome experience. Even, you know, being there and being a volunteer, and you still get to experience some cool camp things. So now I'll talk about some of my favorite memories from my experience at Hog Island. There's a lot of awesome things that we did, but these are just a few highlights, and they really squeeze a lot into a week. They kept us very busy, so had a really enjoyable time. So number one, I got to meet Steve Kress. So he's a part of this whole Hog Island legacy and history. And it's just so cool to be part of, you know, one of the generations that gets to hear him speak and tell the story of the Puffin restoration. And if you're interested in that story, he did write a book entitled Project Puffin. So he was able to sign my copy of the book there. So that was really exciting, but definitely a great book to check out if you're more interested in that story, because it's a really awesome story of conservation. We also were able to go on a whole island hike. I think this is something that probably happens every camp week, right? You go on a hike around the whole island. It takes 4 or 5 hours, and just enjoying the scenery. So they kind of joke it looks a little bit like Jurassic Park out there in some parts of the island, because there are just acres and acres of these amazing hay-scented ferns. So that's that fern picture that you're seeing. It's just beautiful ferns, and they're fragrant as well. We were able to go out and see that kitchen midden too, that was left over from when Native Americans were on the island. And the really cool thing about the kitchen midden is that it actually changed the soil chemistry and made it so that the island is a suitable place for milkweed. And then the milkweed attracts the monarch butterflies, and they were there in droves at the time that I was there. So I really enjoyed getting out and taking pictures of the monarch caterpillars and butterflies as well. Of course, Annie mentioned the moss as well. The moss was really beautiful. It was dry at the time that I went, but I can only imagine, yeah, if we had gotten a rain, that moss would be so lush and gorgeous. There was really cool moss and lichens and fungi to look at, and they also led a mycology walk, so you could learn a little bit about the fungi that was there as well. And then we went on this puffin adventure. So we got to go out to Eastern Egg Rock to look at these puffins. We didn't actually step on the rock island itself, but we were on the boat. Had a great time there. So I, of course, had to bring along my camera with me, and I had a big old 12-pound lens on it, and I got a little seasick looking through it to get pictures of puffins, but it's totally worth it because I think I got a couple good pictures, and I really enjoyed my experience. And then I took a selfie there with my roommate for the week, Erin. She was somebody that I met there at camp. She's from New York. And we just had our whole boat full of people, and they actually took us out to a second island to explore that island as well when we went on our puffin adventure. We also enjoyed tide pooling too. So there's tide pools there on the island, and we went out with these big sign nets and looked for things. So people found lobster. There were so many hermit crabs, you couldn't even take a step without having a fear of stepping on one. So we found lots of hermit crabs. And then one thing I thought was really cool, they had a touch tank that's like right at the Queen Mary, kind of as you enter the island from the ramp. You can, you know, explore this touch tank, and it's right outside the lab. So that was really neat. We could put our findings in there. And I didn't even realize this, but then when I was going through all of the photos from the Friends of Hog Island archives, which is where all my historical photos I've been using have come from, I saw a picture of this touch tank. So apparently this touch tank has been around since, I believe, the 1950s in one of the photos. So they constructed this, and they actually pull water up from the ocean and then pump it into this touch tank, and then it gets kind of recycled. And so it's a really neat thing that they have going there, and it's a cool addition to their lab. We had a lot of class sessions happening, so some of these, because we did have a large group of like 35 educators, some of them were like optionals, and some of them were things that everybody did. So everybody did birding, everybody did nature journaling, but then we could split up and choose the sessions that we wanted to go to. So some of these pictures are from ones that I did not attend, but wish I did, because there were just so many great options of things that you could do. So one that I thought was really neat in the vein of poetry was they would do these like blackout poetry sessions. And I thought this would be something really cool to bring back to our camps as well, because I feel like it takes the pressure out of writing a poem a little bit. It's like you have this sheet of paper. I think this one that's up there at the top was just like an information sheet about sea life. But then they black out certain words and they choose the words that they want to be a part of their poem. So that becomes the poem. And I thought that was really cool. And they set up like a tree with all of their blackout poetry and other things. We also did a lot of nature journaling. This is a picture of my roommate's journal. My illustrations are not that good. But she did some beautiful work in her journal and put it out at the end of the week for everybody to look through and take pictures of if they wanted to. So I thought that was really cool. And it was something that they encourage that campers do like in their off time too. So when we're not doing other activities, we could be working in our nature journal. And it was a really neat way to connect to nature and just kind of slow down and be more observational. And another thing that I really enjoyed about the nature journaling is that they made it really accessible. So of course, Erin was a great artist, but for people like me, they introduced like a blind contour. So you don't spend too much time looking at your blank page worried about starting your sketch, right? So you can sketch something without even looking at the page as you're sketching, just looking at your subject. So that was really cool. And then they have different verbal like writing prompts. So I think I wonder, I noticed those sorts of things. Every day or every evening, they would put out the schedule for the next day. So you don't really get your schedule well ahead of time. I know I was like nosy and trying to figure out what would be happening at camp and what I would experience and why don't they send this weeks ahead of time. But they don't do it because things are so subject to change with weather and instructors and tides and all of that. So everything comes the night before basically. So it was this, oh, I wonder what's on the schedule, what's on the docket for tomorrow. Like we didn't even know we were going on our puffin cruise until it was announced the night before. So and then down there at the bottom, I have a picture of, his name is David Warren, and he was the artist in residence for our week. So they have an artist in residence program, which I think is a really neat way for artists to share their work and get out. And apparently these are very, very coveted residencies. Some of you might know of Rosalie Hazlett. She was the artist in residence just a couple of years ago, and she does like Appalachian art and very beautiful watercolor art. But David was very, very talented as well. He did watercolor art and sketching. He did like, he called it in plein air watercolor. So that means that he would just sketch what he saw as he saw it. He wouldn't work on things back at his cabin or whatever. He would just sit out there for hours and paint what he saw as he saw it. So he actually made the sketch he's working on in the photo, or the watercolor, was of us tide pooling. And then at the end of the week, we all got to take home a little rectangle of his sketch or of his watercolor. So that was really awesome. And he did a program for us where he helped us with our sketching and our nature journals as well. And he's a really great teacher too. And of course, so many more memories, so many things that I enjoyed about the week. Up at the top, there's a picture of just one of my breakfasts. They made amazing food there. I mean, and it would accommodate every dietary restriction just with so much ease and grace, and it was just phenomenal. The food, and that's thanks to some volunteers as well that work in the kitchen and some awesome chefs. So really enjoyed that. I have a couple photos there. So one, the porthole photo, that was my dorm building. So I believe that that was one of the historical buildings that was part of the Point Breeze, and in bungalows as well. So, that's an older building and I got to stay there and it was still very comfortable stay, awesome, experience. And then, one night we went out with a group of a few folks and I found some people taking pictures of the moon. So I was like, I've got to get my camera and take pictures of the moon. It was my first time taking a picture of the moon. So I went out with my big lens and the moon was just glowing orange that night. So I had a beautiful time doing that. We also had a woman from Virginia who works at a bat conservation organization and she led a bat walk. And that was the cool thing about the week is you had instructors who were really knowledgeable, amazing people that were just so personable and down to earth and also often really renowned in their field as well. And then you also had campers that had this diverse array of experiences. Some of them, like Katie, were classroom teachers. Some of them, like me, were people who work in environmental education spaces. So it was great to learn from and nerd out with these awesome people. That's exactly how we introduced ourselves at the beginning of the week. They said, tell us your name and what we can come to you to nerd out about. So for me, I said foraging and everybody went around. And so it was just neat to meet people with sometimes the same niche interests or sometimes different niche interests that you could just have a conversation with at any time. We also did some group bonding experiences, like at the bottom here, we were doing contra dancing, which is like country dancing. So we had a really fun time, just doing, it's kind of like a line dance. And that was a fun, they always had like these evening kind of optional social things. So it's really a good time. And then I have the sign that says welcome to the Queen Mary Lab. So the lab was a really great place to be as well, because they had lots of resources in there. So they would do, they'd have like nature journals that some of the instructors had worked on. If you wanted nature journaling ideas, they had watercolor paints that you could borrow for your nature journal. They had all sorts of taxidermy, birds and mammals and all sorts of things. They had microscopes, digital microscopes, and they had a puffin live cam, so you could always see what the puffins were up to on Egg Rock. So all of that was really cool in the Queen Mary Lab. And I'll tell you guys a quick kind of funny story that was like at the end of my week. So in the Queen Mary Lab, every day we would have a mystery of the day. One of my slides, like during the history, had a mystery of the day thing on it. So apparently this has been going on for quite a while. It's a camp tradition. So we go and fill out, it would just be, you know, a few questions. You'd get points for the questions. There would be prizes at the end of the week for whoever on the leaderboard had the most points. And you could use resources like field guides and even the internet as well. So I was eating lunch with one of the instructors one day, and she's like, I've got to tell you guys something funny. She's like, I'm the person who tallies up the points for mystery of the day. And somebody went in there and we got a jokester among us because somebody filled out just one of the questions. So they only got 1 point out of like a possible 6 points. And they wrote that their name was Luke. She's like, thinking, I don't know that there is a Luke in this camp session. I haven't met a Luke. Does anybody go by Luke? She's pulling out a roster looking for Luke, and then she looks at the last name. The last name is Warmwater. So his name was Luke Warmwater. And so all week I was like, who is Luke Warmwater? So of course I started to notice people's personalities and like who's the jokesters in the room. So I'd go up to people and accuse them and be like, hey Luke. Hey Luke. And they, what are you talking about? So I couldn't figure out who Luke Warmwater was. And at the end of the camp, we were doing, you know, we had all these tearful goodbyes and you know, thanking our awesome instructor, sharing our favorite times of the week. And then at the end, that one instructor goes up and she's like, tells the story to everybody because most people didn't know about Luke Warmwater. And she's like, so now Luke, it's time to reveal yourself. Like, speak now or forever hold your peace. Who is it? And we were at this point suspecting FOE volunteers and anybody. And then nobody raises their hand. And then one guy says, well, I guess he got cold feet. So that was just a funny little interlude. So that is my Hog Island experience. I had such an amazing time. I am definitely itching to go back one day, whether as a volunteer or a camper. But it's just such a special place that many people said it really becomes kind of an anchor in their life. And I think some people here would agree with that it just becomes a place that you've got to get back to and a place that shapes you as a person. So does anybody have any questions for me or comments or personal experiences that they'd like to share? Yeah, Bruni.
Did they ban the first puffins they released they were hoping to come, and then they finally got one coming back? Was that abandoned?
Bruni is asking.
Otherwise, you wouldn't know that it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bruni was asking if the first puffins were banded, and I believe that they were, and Annie was agreeing with that.
Yeah, because they were pufflings when they came, and so they cared for them and
Right,
they banned them, and then we're waiting for them to come back to meet and nest. And so the band one, they could tell,
Yeah. And again, read that book, Project Puffin, because there's so many more cool details, the story of how they raised these pufflings and everything, so awesome stuff. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is the island located off the coast or in a big lake?
It is off the coast. Yeah, so it's, the closest town is Damariscotta, Maine. It's about 20-30 minutes from there. Or the address says Bremen, Maine, which I guess is a smaller town. But yeah, it's off the coast of Maine.
How do you get back and forth to the mainland?
Oh yeah, good question. So they just have like shuttle boats that they run. It's not very far from the mainland. In fact, the way the island gets electricity is they actually have an electric line that goes like under the water. And that's how the island gets electricity. And they've been making efforts to go more and more kind of off grid over the years, getting solar panels and such. But you can clearly see the mainland, as long as it's not foggy, so it's very close there. Any other questions? Yeah, Janet.
So, have you had a chance to incorporate anything into your programs here yet? And if so, what, or what have you done now, or what are you thinking about doing?
Oh, great question. Janet's asking if I've had a chance to incorporate anything I learned from Hog Island into my programs thus far, and if not, what am I planning on doing? And the answer to that is, so far this year I've been doing Watershed, which is mostly kind of, a more prescribed curriculum and everything, so I haven't had the chance to incorporate too much into my program so far. But I'm really excited for a lot of things for summer camp. I'm brainstorming, I'd love to do some iteration of like the mystery of the day and make it like age appropriate for the kids. So maybe just like a one question or something that they find in research and field guides, or maybe something that they'll discover out in the trails. And then also the other thing is, I just learned so much about nature journaling, and it is something that we do at our camps and we have done for a while, but I've never personally been like, a person that nature journals a lot on my own until this camp. So, I'm excited to bring more of those like nature journaling prompts into some of my summer camp programming, and really just do like a more robust training for our summer camp counselors on how they can incorporate nature journaling, because I feel like it's never been my strength of doing that. Now I'm really excited about it. Yeah, any other questions?
So they have a session where you can just do nature journaling.
Do they really? They have a nature journaling specific session?
Birding,
Oh,
sketching and stuff like that.
that's awesome.
You should definitely go back for it.
All right. Yeah, that one and
And June this coming year? It's June.
that's awesome. And photography is on my list too, just because that would be super fun.
Then you can learn how to take photos on the boat when it's going up and down.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, it was a lot of trial and error messing shutter speeds and I mean, it was a challenge for my camera to capture those puffins on the water.
And there's field ornithology class that you should do too.
That's
That's about third week in June.
awesome. Putting in a plug for field ornithology, so that would be a great one, I bet. Does Steve
Migration too.
and my,
They have an early migration.
does Steve Press speak at a lot of these different camp sessions?
He comes to family camp every year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't see him this year.
Not this year. Yeah, he came to Educator's Camp this year and Annie's mentioned he's come to family camp and so pretty cool to have the opportunity again to be one of the generations of campers that gets to hear about his legacy straight from his mouth. So that's really cool. All right. I see online Eileen Kerfman raised a hand. Did she type a question, Sonia?
Yes, I'm wondering, you can hear me?
Yes.
I'm wondering, like, what the requirements for volunteers are, whether, what roles are needed and, how many hours, do you have free hours while you're there? And, is it, a competitive thing to be able to do it, or are they always looking for more volunteers?
I have a couple people in the audience who are better equipped to answer that question than me. Do you want to come a little closer to the mic
Can I
if you'd
just
like
yell?
to answer?
Can I just yell?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Eileen, can you hear her?
Yes.
Okay. Usually they have, several, bogey volunteers every session. And so they do give you a chance to go out on some of the field trips. After you slaved away in the kitchen and cleaning the bathrooms. I don't think it's that competitive, because it seems like they're always asking for more people.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go to the fohi.org website, you can find out about volunteering there.
Friends,
Awesome.
the Friends of Hog Island
Yeah.
is that acronym, FOHI.
Yeah.
They have a service week in the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, to set up and take things down, and that's a lot of, maintenance, gardening, saws and machines, but it looks like light, housework too. And then during the weeks that there's camps, mostly it seems like it's the kitchen, and that could be like 5 to 8 hours, depending on how many people. So the kitchen can be kind of, intense on your feet, but then also getting delicious food and a lot of the experiences you're still able to be part of.
Yeah, I also think I noticed on the schedule for this past summer that there was like a service week that was, it still had a tuition associated, but it was a lower tuition, and they said they had a lot of scholarships available that was like for things like painting the decoys. And helping out the Seabird Institute. So that might also be an option for some folks that are interested more in like that type of volunteering as well, because it would be a little bit more like a camp session. But yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
I volunteered in 2014, at that point, Sierra Club was doing the volunteering at Hog Island.
Okay.
And I said, why? Audubon has volunteers, and they said, Audubon will look at the birds, Sierra Club will work.
That's
And I did, I worked.
That's funny. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, now I guess most of the volunteers are the Friends of Hog Island. And also just another plug for that Friends of Hog Island website, because that, like I mentioned, that's where I got all of these photos that I use. And there are many, many hundreds of photos on there that you can check out about the history of Hog Island. They have a timeline that gives a much more detailed history than what I just went over if you're interested in that. And Annie also brought a book along that she's gonna lend to me that she can show off to anyone who's interested in learning more about the history of Hog Island. It's called Nature's People.
Oh, I have it still. I thought I already gave it to you.
Part of that one reads like a romance
It
novel.
does.
It's
It is not just a nonfiction. This is a page turner.
That's awesome. And Sonia, I saw your hand raised.
Oh, yeah, not questions from the chat, but just some nice comments. So Deanna says, thank you for a wonderful presentation. When we picked Noah up from Hog Island years ago, we were all so jealous. What a beautiful place.
Oh,
And Deborah says, I would sure love to take all those nature journaling and nature art classes at Hog Island. Not that I think I can do so, but a lovely dream. Delightful presentation. Thank you.
thank you, Deanna and Deborah and everyone. Yes.
Wondering if Annie could speak to the time of, on the family, time, how much is spent with your child, how much is spent alone, how much is adult time, that kind of thing.
I love that because as a teacher, I love to see good instruction, and the instructors were knowledgeable, but very good with all ages. So there was grandparents, parents, and children, and everyone was taught at their level. And I'm a very basic birder, and kids were better than me. So there was very good instruction, and they are very, I don't know if strict is the best word, but they really make sure that families stay together. So with these optionals, our schedule is almost identical to Laurel's. If we were on the boat, we were there together. We are eating meals together. We, of course, stay in the same room together. So they make sure that you stay together as a family so that you're experiencing it together. And I had heard of other camps where, oh, the parents go out and they do this and the kids are doing some craft. Everybody's experiencing it at the same time. And so even if there's a family, like, but with us, we had my husband and I and Jovina, my daughter, we could go, and two of us, maybe one person was allowed to go and like do a different thing, but all together all the time. But then if like one day if you just needed a break for a minute, you could go and have a, like take an hour and catch your breath kind of thing. They would let you do that, but they didn't let the kids just like run wild on the camp. They kept the structure very, very tight in a considerate, caring way. It didn't feel strict, but it was definitely like, no, this is what we're doing, and we're doing it all together, and we're having this experience. And it was very in-depth.
Sometimes at family camp, it's the kids and grandparents.
Actually, I was telling them earlier that one of my daughter's friends it was the great granddaughter of Bart Cadbury, who was one of the first directors. And so her grandmother is a big volunteer, and she comes to family camp, and her mom was there. So it's like all these generations, and then that great granddaughter is like 11 and one of our friends at family camp. It's really sweet.
That's awesome. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for coming to my presentation and learning about Hog Island. I really appreciate it. If anybody, wants to talk after the presentation, I will stick around for a little while. So thank you.